You
Worked
ever
for me for
walk
so
into
long, I
someone's
have to share it.
house and
My
instantly feel
boyfriend
like
Dan
you
and I
made
had
the
just started
biggest
renting
mistake of your
apartments
life?
together and money was
Tonight's
tight.
stories are real
It was
encounters with
2001.
creepy
We were
strangers,
both in our
hidden
early 20s,
danger,
and I couldn't
and
find a
moments where
job,
people
and I
barely
relied on word
escaped
of mouth to earn
alive.
some cash
And trust
wherever I
me,
could.
the first
I loved to
story
clean and
only gets
organize,
worse the
so I
longer
gave
you
friends
stay
and family
inside
the
that
go-ahead to
house.
give out my name and
Story
number
1.
to
The
anybody who could use my
Tighty-Whitey
help over the
Twins.
summer.
Main featured story.
Dan, his brother,
This
and
happened
Dad
back in
all did
2001.
carpentry work.
At the
They
time,
also
my
got work through
boyfriend
word of
Dan and
mouth.
I had just moved
None
into
of
a
them had
tiny
too many
apartment
exciting
outside
stories to tell,
Portland.
other than
We were
doing work in
broke,
hoarder's
like
home
counting
or odd
coins for
requests
gas
as
broke.
far as the cabinet
Dan
design
worked
or placement
construction
was
and
concerned.
cabinet installation,
Dan got
and
a
I
call from
cleaned
an elderly
houses
woman
whenever I
wondering
could
if he
find
can come
work.
by and grab her an
Most days
estimate,
we barely saw
unfinished in
each
her
other
kitchen.
because we were both
She said her
constantly
husband
trying to
died
make
before he
enough
could
money
install
to
the cabinets
survive.
and countertop that
One
he
rainy
purchased,
evening,
and
while we
somebody
were
from her
eating
church
cheap
gave her
takeout
his
on the
number.
floor because we
He
didn't
said
even own a
absolutely
table
and
yet,
offered to come
Dan
out
got
the
a
next
phone
day.
call.
She
I remember
objected
him
and said,
putting it on
"This
speaker
needs to
for
be
a
done now,
second
though.
because
That's
the
why I
woman
called.
on the other end
They
sounded
said that you could help
strange.
me.
She had
What
this
am I supposed to
shaky
do?
old voice.
I'm an old woman.
Hello, is
I
this
live
the
all alone and
carpenter?
my husband died."
Dan said yes.
Dan was a
The
pretty
woman
chill guy and
explained that
kept
her
calm,
husband had
explaining
recently
that I had his
died,
car
and
and I
he'd
wouldn't
left
be
their
home from
kitchen
running errands for a
unfinished.
couple of hours,
Cabinets
and by
missing,
then it would be too dark for him
half-installed
to come out.
counters,
Let me
exposed wood
also note
everywhere.
that although Dan
Then
had
she
a soft,
suddenly
not very
said,
masculine voice,
I need you to
he
come
was a big
tonight.
guy at about 6'4"
Dan looked
and pretty
outside.
muscular as well.
It was already getting
The old
dark.
lady perked up and
He
asked,
politely told her
"Will she
he
be
could
coming
come
along
first
tomorrow?"
thing in the morning
In
instead.
the sweetest voice.
There was a long silence.
Dan said, looking
Then the
back,
woman
that this should have
asked,
been a red flag
Will
by
you
the
be
tone of her
alone?
voice, and
Dan
the
laughed
fact that she
awkwardly
was
and
so
said,
adamant about him coming
No, my
right that
girlfriend
moment.
usually comes
But as
with
soon
me
as
to
she
help
heard he had a
clean up.
girlfriend, she
The
changed
old
her
woman
tone
instantly
and
changed
got
her
excitement
tone.
in her voice,
Oh, good,
asking
she
about
said
the next
excitedly.
day like it was no
Wonderful.
problem for her to wait.
Bring her too.
He didn't see
Something
anything
about
weird
the
about
way
it at
she
the
said
time
it
and
made
felt
me
bad for her
uncomfortable
because he thought she
immediately.
must have been lonely
But
and
we
wanting
needed the
company or
money
something.
badly, so the next
The next
morning we
day, we
drove
both head
out to
out
the
to her
address
house.
she gave
We
us.
brought along a
The
small
house
bouquet
sat
of
at the end
flowers
of a
that we got at
quiet
the
road
grocery store to
surrounded
give her.
by dead trees.
I figured
From
she would enjoy
outside,
chatting
it
while Dan
actually
checked
looked
out her
beautiful.
kitchen, and maybe I could
Big
come
white
back with Dan
house,
and help her with
fancy
other things around
windows,
the house
huge
while he
porch.
worked if she needed.
But the second we
Her
stepped
township was only
inside,
45
the
minutes
smell
away,
hit
but
us.
I was excited
Rotting
to go
food,
because this township
mold,
is known to have
dirty
really awesome
laundry.
old houses and
The
mansions.
inside looked nothing
There are
like the
also other normal
exterior.
subdivisions
Trash
depending
covered
on
the
what
floor.
direction you drive in.
Old newspapers
My
were
friends
stacked
and I back in high
everywhere.
school used
The
to drive there
wallpaper
just
was
to
stained
cruise around
yellow.
and look at
And then
neat
the woman
houses.
appeared. She
When
wore
we
this
pulled up to
filthy
the old
nightgown
lady's
covered
house, I
in
was
dark
eager to go
stains.
inside because
Her
it was
gray
such
hair
a
looked
cute-looking
greasy
house from
like
the
it
outside.
hadn't been washed in
Very
weeks.
fairy tale-ish.
But what
Gray
really
with white
bothered me
trim,
was the way she
with
stared
vines
at
climbing
me.
up the side
Not
of the house.
Dan. Me.
It was a
She walked
shotgun-style
straight toward
house,
me,
so it looked tiny
smiling
from
too
afar.
wide.
The
Then
small
suddenly
lawn was
she
overgrown
lifted
and
both
messy,
hands
but
toward my face
I
like she
honestly
wanted to
thought it
touch
added to
me.
the charm of the
I
home.
stepped back fast enough that she
We knocked
barely
on the
missed
door
me.
and we are greeted
Oh,
with
she
a tiny
whispered,
elderly woman,
Pretty girl.
shorter than me,
I
and
remember
I'm 5
getting
foot.
chills
She
instantly.
had on a dirty
Dan
nightgown
quickly
and even dirtier
interrupted and asked
slippers.
to see the kitchen.
She looked past
The
Dan
woman
and smiled
slowly
wildly
pointed
at me
down the hallway.
while reaching her bony
We
hands
walked
out to
in
grab my face.
and froze.
I hold up the
Standing in
flowers
the
to deflect
kitchen
and
was a
say,
huge man wearing
Dan
nothing
wanted to bring
except
you some
dirty white
flowers.
underwear.
She
That's
lost her
it.
smile,
No
grabbed the
pants.
flowers and said,
No shirt.
"The kitchen's
Just
through
stained,
here."
ripped tidy
She turned
witties.
around to lead us,
The man stared at us
revealing a brown
silently while
stain on
chewing
the back of
something
her
with his
nightgown.
mouth open.
Dan
The
and I
old
look at
woman
each other
smiled
and he
proudly.
makes a goofy, grossed
This
out
is my
face.
son Marcus.
I make a
Marcus
judgmental
never
face
said a
back
word.
and swat his arm
He
as
just
if to
kept
say,
staring at me.
"Be nice. She's
Then
an old
another
woman."
door opened behind
We
us,
walked through a dark living
and another man
and
walked
nothing
out,
is really out of the ordinary,
also wearing
other than
only
the smell,
filthy
which is
underwear.
like cigarettes,
I
mold,
immediately
and body
looked at
odor.
Dan,
We
because
enter
the woman
kitchen,
had
and there's a
specifically
closed door
told
about
us
10 to
she
12
lived
feet
alone.
ahead,
Now
leading to
suddenly
rooms
there were
further back
two
in the
grown
house.
men inside the
There was
house,
a man sitting
both
shirtless at
staring
the
at
kitchen
me,
table in the corner.
neither wearing
He
clothes.
was very hairy and
The
overweight
second
with
guy
greasy hair
started
down to his
laughing under
shoulders.
his breath.
The old lady
The
said,
sound alone made
"This
my
is my
stomach
son,
twist.
Marcus." He
Dan
was probably
quietly
in his
asked
late
where the
30s.
cabinets were
He
supposed to
said
go.
nothing but stood up
Marcus
took his bowl
ignored
to
him
the sink.
completely.
Great.
Instead, he stepped
Marcus
closer
has no
to me.
pants on.
Way too
Just
close.
dirty and
I could smell
crazy
sweat
dirty.
and cigarette
Tidy
smoke coming
whities
off
with
him.
several holes
Then the
around the
second
waistband.
brother moved toward the
I shot
kitchen
Dan the same
entrance
grossed out look
and
that he
blocked the
shot me
doorway.
earlier.
That's
He
when I
jokingly
realized
shoots me back
something
a
was
judgmental
wrong.
look and swats
Very
my arm.
wrong.
I
Dan
give him
noticed
a,
it too.
"No, seriously,
He
I'm
stepped
creeped
between
out,"
me and
kind of
Marcus
look,
and said
he nods to
firmly,
acknowledge it.
"We should get going."
So what cabinets are you?
Nobody moved.
Dan tried
The
to
old
ask,
woman
but
just
was
stood there
interrupted with
smiling.
Marcus pointing
Then
to
one
the
of the
flowers and
brothers
asking the
started
lady,
breathing heavily
"Where are
while
those from?"
staring directly at
She
me.
points to Dan,
And before I
Marcus
could even
snatches the
process
flowers
what was
out of her hand,
happening, he
throws them
started
into the
touching
open trash
himself
bag sitting on the floor,
right there in front
and
of
walks out of
us.
the kitchen into
I
the
felt
living room we
completely
just walked through.
frozen. The
He
second
just
brother
lost
kept
his dad,
blocking
so I
the
assumed he
exit
had
while
some sort of
smiling
mental
like he thought
disability
this
and
was
was being
funny.
sensitive.
Dan
About
Subbenly
another dude
snapped.
showing his mom attention
Now for
disability and was
context,
being sensitive.
Dan was 6
About
feet
another
4
dude showing
inches,
his mom
worked
attention.
construction every day, and looked
So where are the
terrifying when
cabinets and
angry.
countertop that
He
you need
stepped
installed?
forward so aggressively
Dan
the guy
asked the old
actually
woman.
flinched. Then
I
Dan
thought you were
yelled.
bringing them.
The
She
last guy
huffed
who
out,
cornered me ended
sounding
up
shocked
dead.
that he would even ask that.
The room went silent. Dan
sorry, I
pointed
thought you said your
directly at
husband
both
bought them and
brothers.
you needed them installed.
You move away from that door
Dan
right
said,
now,
confused and a
or I
bit
swear
nervous at
all
how the
three
woman
of
was
you are going to
reacting
regret
now.
it. For a second,
So you brought
nobody
nothing?
moved. Then
What is it you
Marcus
do?
slowly backed away.
What is it that you're going to try
The
to sell me?
second brother unlocked the
She gets
doorway
closer
and
to
stepped
Dan as she's
aside.
throwing her hands
Dan
up in
grabbed my
disbelief
arm
and
so
anger.
hard it hurt and
Marcus
practically
comes
dragged me
quickly, stomping in
outside.
at the sound of
The
his mother's
second we
distress.
got into the truck,
Rushing
he
in
locked
from
the
the other
doors
door
and
past
sped
the
away
kitchen was
without
another
saying
man,
a word.
around the same
I
age.
remember looking back at the
Wonderful.
house.
This guy
The
is in
old
his
woman
underwear
was
too.
standing in the front
Freaking
window
dirty
watching
tidy
us
whities.
leave,
This
smiling.
woman told Dan on the
We
phone
called
that she
police
lived all
after we
alone.
got home.
This
But
new guy
because
freezes
nobody
just
physically
past the doorway
attacked
and
us,
just stares
there
at me,
wasn't much they
standing
could
only
do.
feet away.
Even now, over
Marcus
20
rushes
years
forward
later,
and stands
I
between
still
us and his
refuse
mother
to enter
and pushes
strangers'
her out
homes
towards the
alone.
living room.
Because sometimes
Both
your
doors are
instincts
blocked by
notice
the tidy
danger
whitey
before your
twins.
brain does.
Dan
And that
scoops me up
house
behind him in an
felt
attempt to
evil the
block me from
second we
both
stepped
guys.
inside.
We have to be
Story
heading
2,
out now.
the woman
He said calmly,
downstairs.
hoping not to escalate
Back in
things.
college, a
We hear
group
the
of
old
us
lady
rented a
squawk
beach
out
house
aloud.
in New
Hi,
Jersey for one
from
last
the
summer
living room.
party before classes
Marcus
started.
doesn't move.
At around
I'll see
2
what I can do
a.m.,
about the cabinets.
we heard screaming
Dan said
downstairs.
as we inch forward.
At first we
Marcus
thought it was
barely
just drunk
inches
people
forward, but still
arguing.
blocks the way.
But then we heard a
I
child
frantically
crying.
tug on Dan's
One
arm
of my
to get him to
friends
look
went
over
to
at the other
check.
guy.
Turns
Now
out
with
the
his hand
woman
down his
living
dirty
below us
underrag
had gotten
masturbate.
so drunk, she collapsed on
That's
top
when
of
my
her
calm
toddler
child
after
boyfriend
falling
loses it.
off a couch.
I've never heard him
The
scream
kid
like
could barely
this.
breathe.
He remembers
We pulled
growing
the
up, his
child
older
out
brother
while
taught
the
him how to
mother
deal with
stayed
bullies.
unconscious on the
Say some
floor.
crazy messed up shit to
Police
them,
and
they'll be
paramedics
too stunned
arrived
to
minutes
react.
later. What
Dan
still
screams with
haunts me
rage.
is the fact that
The
if
last
nobody
person
had
that cornered me
checked,
got beat to death.
that little boy
You won't
probably
like what I'll
wouldn't
do
have
to you and your
survived
mom
the
if you don't
night.
get out of my way.
Story 3, the
With his
man in
veins
Kiev.
popping, spit
In
flying.
2019,
Marcus
a
looked
college
surprised
student
and he
in
rushed
Kiev
past
left her
us
dorm
towards his
around
brother.
1:30 in the
For a
morning to
split
buy
second, we
waffles
both
from a
thought he was
nearby
going to
store.
attack Dan, so
The
he
streets were
instinctively
nearly
threw up his
empty.
fist to defend himself.
Halfway there, she
Marcus
noticed a
pushes his
man
brother
walking
into the other
behind
room
her.
and slams the door
At
behind
first,
him.
he kept his
Dan and I
distance.
hurry out of the house.
Then he started
I
matching
think
her
the old lady
speed.
was sitting in the dark
When
in the
she
living
crossed
room,
the
but
street,
I didn't stop to
he
look
crossed
around
too.
as we were scurrying
That's
out.
when she realized
We
he
called
was
the cops when we
following
got
her
home.
intentionally.
Didn't have cell phones
She turned
then, but
around
nothing
and
really
yelled
came
at
of it
him to
because
stop.
They said he didn't really do anything
Instead,
wrong.
he
He didn't
smiled
expose himself
and
either,
started running toward
they
her.
didn't try to attack
She
us.
sprinted back toward her dorm while
They
hearing
agreed
his
that it was
footsteps
bizarre, but
getting
nothing could
closer
be done
behind
about it.
her. Luckily,
We asked
one of
around
the older
and nobody
students
knew
near
these
the
people,
entrance
so
saw
we're
what
not
was
sure how she
happening
got a
and
number.
opened the security
I don't know
gate
if they were
just
just
in
mentally
time.
ill,
The
if she
man
lied on
stopped
purpose to
outside the
get us
gate
over there,
staring
or
at her
why things
silently
happened the way
before
they did.
walking away into the
It was just
dark.
scary as shit.
Police never
Getting
found
boxed
him.
in and not knowing
Story
what these
4,
creepy, almost
Jonathan.
naked dudes were
When I
thinking.
was 16, I
Ever
missed
since
my
then,
bus home
I
after
tend to
school
avoid
in
going inside
Ontario,
other people's
Canada.
houses unless I
While
really
waiting
know them.
alone near a convenience store, a man walked over and introduced himself as Jonathan. He looked around 30. At first, he acted friendly. Then he started asking personal questions. Where I
I was
lived,
17 at the
whether
time.
my parents
My
were
friends and I had
home,
rented a beach
if I
house
had a
in New Jersey.
boyfriend.
We were
I
so
lied and
excited,
said my
and it
dad
was really
was
the
on
best
his
time of my
way.
life. My
Jonathan
friend's
smiled
boyfriend was
weirdly
there,
and moved
and
closer
he was
anyway.
the only one who
Then
was
he
21.
suddenly grabbed my
This will
wrist.
be important later.
Not hard,
Anyway,
but
at
enough
about
to
2
scare
a.m.,
me.
we heard a knock
He
on the
kept
door.
saying,
We were drinking and
"Relax.
smoking, having
I'm
a
just
great
trying
time,
to be
playing
your
beer
friend."
pong and engaging
I
in
yanked my
general
arm
debauchery.
away and ran
So-
straight.
All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Today, we are doing the ultimate challenge. Think you can handle it? Let's find out.